Imagine the most dangerous question in history isn't, does God exist? It's, where did God come from? If everything has a cause, who caused the cause? In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why that question has gotten people silenced, exiled, even killed, and why the clues to answer it have been hiding in plain sight. Not in secret vaults or lost scrolls, but inside lines you've read 100 times and never noticed. We'll follow a breadcrumb trail from an ancient name that sounds like a riddle, I am, to a Greek word that doesn't mean what most people think, to modern physics that quietly breaks our common sense about time and causation. Here's the setup. We inherit a simple timeline: creation, then history, then you. Here's the conflict. The earliest texts don't behave like timelines. Light shows up before suns. A voice speaks reality into being. A beginning that may not be a beginning at all. If God isn't just another being inside the universe, are we asking the wrong question? Stay with me, because what comes next will flip the frame. A way of reading I am that points past objects and into being itself. Why the word isn't a slogan, but a blueprint. And how this changes the stakes for prayer, morality, and by you. Quick check-in. If the ground of reality isn't in time, can it have an origin in time? And if not, what exactly are we looking for when we say God? Let's pull the first thread. If it unravels, your picture of reality might never look the same again. If you're into clear, myth-busting deep dives like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest. The dangerous question. Let's start with the question itself. Where did God come from? On the surface, it looks innocent enough. Kids ask it in Sunday school. Skeptics ask it in debates. Philosophers have wrestled with it for centuries. And yet, for most of human history, simply voicing that thought could get you branded a heretic, or worse, because it doesn't just poke holes in a doctrine. It threatens the foundation on which the entire structure of faith is built. If everything we see requires a cause, a spark before the flame, a parent before the child, then logic says God must have a cause, too. But if God has a cause, then by definition, he's no longer the uncaused cause, the prime mover, the ultimate foundation. He's just another link in the chain. And that chain suddenly stretches back into a darkness no one has answers for. That's why religions throughout history have treated this question as dangerous, even forbidden, because once you pull at that thread, the tapestry of certainty begins to unravel. It's not just about doubting God, it's about doubting the very rules of reality that people cling to for meaning, order, and hope. But here's the twist. What if the question itself is flawed? What if asking where assumes a category mistake, that God is something that exists in time, like a tree or a mountain? If that assumption is wrong, then the search for God's origin is already pointing us in the wrong direction. The illusion of time. Every day, we live inside a framework we rarely question: time. You wake up, check your phone, eat breakfast. Yesterday is behind you, tomorrow hasn't happened yet, and life feels like a straight line moving forward. Cause, then effect. Beginning, then end. But what if this sense of time isn't the ultimate reality? What if it's more like a lens, a filter our minds impose on existence to make it manageable? Einstein cracked the door open to this idea when he showed that time isn't absolute. It bends, stretches, and even runs differently depending on where you are and how fast you're moving. Then quantum physics came along and made things stranger. Particles can exist in multiple states at once. Sometimes, an effect shows up before its cause, and the simple act of observing can change what's real. If that sounds confusing, good. It should be. Because here's the implication. The tidy chain of cause and effect that we rely on every day might not be the ultimate truth. It might just be a local trick of perception. And if that's the case, then asking, where did God come from, is like asking, what happened before time began? It assumes a timeline that reality itself may not actually follow. This realization doesn't solve the mystery of God. It makes the mystery deeper. And it prepares us for the next puzzle, hidden in plain sight, in a single phrase that has echoed across millennia. I am that I am, the name that isn't a name. In the book of Exodus, Moses stands before a burning bush that blazes without being consumed. Trembling, he asks the voice within it, the most basic question of all. Who are you? You'd expect an answer like a title, the Lord, the Creator, the Almighty. Instead, the reply is baffling. I am that I am. At first glance, it looks evasive, like God is dodging the question. But dig deeper. And this phrase is explosive, because it isn't a name at all. It's existence itself speaking. When you introduce yourself, you say, I am Sarah, or I am David. You define yourself with something external, a label, a history, a relationship. But the burning bush doesn't offer that. It strips away every category and leaves only the raw essence. I am. In Hebrew, the phrase carries layers of meaning. I will be what I will be. I exist. I become. It's timeless, unbounded, beyond beginnings or endings. It doesn't describe a being inside the universe. It describes the ground of being itself. Which means asking, where did God come from, misses the point entirely. If God is, I am, then he's not an object that came from somewhere. He's the context within which somewhere exists at all. But this mystery doesn't stop there, because centuries later, another word would be introduced, one that takes this idea of existence and reframes it as structure, order, even reason itself. That word is logos, the word before words. Fast forward from the Hebrew wilderness to ancient Greece. A new word enters the story, logos. When John's Gospel opens with the line, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," it's easy to skim past it. But in Greek, word doesn't mean what we think. Logos isn't just speech, it's the principle of order, the rational structure behind reality itself. To the philosophers, logos was what made the universe intelligible. Why the stars move with precision, why seasons turn in rhythm, why numbers hold steady no matter where you are. By using logos, John wasn't describing God as a person with a name. He was pointing to the underlying intelligence of existence, the pattern, the reason, the coherence that makes life possible. God isn't just in the cosmos. God is the logic that makes the cosmos function at all. And here's where it gets radical. John doesn't say, "In the beginning the Word came into being." He says the Word was already there, already present before beginnings or causes. So now we've got two profound claims: a God who says, "I am pure being," and a God described as logos, pure order. Put them together, and the question, where did God come from, starts to collapse. Because being and order don't come from anywhere. They're what everything else comes from. But the real test of this idea comes when we push it against the hardest boundary of all, cause and effect itself. Beyond cause and effect. Our entire worldview is built on a chain. Cause, then effect. A seed becomes a tree. A spark starts a fire. A parent gives life to a child. It feels so obvious, so universal, that we assume even God must fit inside this rule. But modern science has already shown the cracks. At the quantum level, particles don't behave like obedient dominoes. They exist in multiple states at once. Sometimes, an outcome shows up before its cause. And the act of simply watching a particle can change what it becomes. Einstein himself called this spooky. But the lesson is clear. Reality doesn't always play by the rules of linear causation. Now, think about what that means for the God question. If God were just another object inside the universe, then yes, he'd need a cause like everything else. But what if God isn't inside the chain at all? What if God is the condition that makes chains possible? Asking, who caused God, might be like asking, what caused causation? Or, where is the edge of infinity? It's not that the answer is hidden, it's that the question itself is built on a faulty premise. And yet, ancient texts seem to know this long before physics did. Which brings us back to the Bible's strangest paradoxes. Stories that only make sense if they're pointing beyond the normal rules of time and sequence. Scripture's hidden paradoxes. Open the first page of Genesis, and you'll notice something strange. Light is created before the sun, moon, or stars exist. Days and nights unfold before there are any celestial bodies to mark them. Time itself seems to be measured before there are clocks in the sky. At face value, it looks like sloppy storytelling, ancient people fumbling with primitive science. But what if that's not the point at all? What if these paradoxes are deliberate, designed to short-circuit our usual way of thinking? Because if creation begins with, "Let there be light," before there is any physical source of light, then maybe the author isn't talking about photons and stars. Maybe light is existence itself, awareness breaking into being, order before objects. And the burning bush that blazes but isn't consumed? Another paradox, a symbol of the infinite manifesting in the finite without being diminished by it, the eternal appearing in time without becoming temporal. These stories read less like history lessons and more like riddles. They aren't telling you what happened back then. They're pointing to truths that sit outside the very categories of then and now, which leads to a deeper realization. Maybe every time scripture seems self-contradictory, it's not failing, it's hinting. Hinting that God isn't a character bound by time and space, but the very framework within which time and space appear. But this raises an even sharper question. If that's true, why does the Bible so often describe God like a person, angry, changing his mind, reacting like us? Manifestations, not the ultimate. If God is eternal, timeless, and beyond cause, then why does Scripture so often portray him like a character in a story? One moment he's angry, the next regretful. Sometimes he changes his mind, makes deals, even seems surprised. At first, this looks like a contradiction. How can an eternal, all-knowing ground of being act like a moody king in the sky? The answer might lie in something mystics have whispered for centuries. What we see in Scripture are not ultimate realities, but manifestations. Theologians call them theophanies, appearances of the infinite within the finite. Like light refracted through a prism, they are partial reflections of something too vast to capture directly. Think of a mirror. It shows you a reflection, but not your full depth. It flattens 3 dimensions into 2. Similarly, when infinite consciousness expresses itself in the temporal world, what we perceive is a reduction, a projection that looks human, emotional, limited, because that's the only way finite minds can process it. That's why Scripture swings between contradictions. God is merciful yet wrathful, near yet transcendent, changeless yet reactive. The paradox isn't a flaw, it's a clue, because behind every projection lies the same ground of being, the eternal I Am. And if that's true, then the shocking implication is this: what we call God may not be separate from the very awareness through which you're experiencing these words right now. Consciousness as the ground of being. If the manifestations of God in Scripture are projections, then what lies behind them? What is the source that keeps showing up in different guises? Fire, voice, light, cloud. More and more, both mystics and scientists are pointing to the same answer: consciousness itself. Physics has peeled back matter to its smallest scales, and what it finds isn't solid. It's probability fields, flickering potentials that only collapse into reality when observed. Which raises a haunting question: what role does awareness itself play in existence? Mystics across traditions have said it plainly. You don't have consciousness, you are consciousness. It isn't a product of the brain. It's the stage on which the brain, the body, and the entire universe appear. Now, think about what that means for God. If consciousness is fundamental, then God isn't a being with consciousness. God is the ground of consciousness itself, the infinite I Am, out of which all experiences, including yours, arise. This is why Paul could tell the philosophers in Athens, "In him we live and move and have our being." He wasn't describing a deity living in the sky. He was describing reality itself as saturated in awareness. And if that's true, then the barrier between you and God isn't just thin, it may be an illusion. But this leads to a dangerous conclusion, one that religious institutions have fought to suppress for centuries. If God is consciousness, then you are far closer to divinity than you've ever been told, the forgotten truth of our own nature. If God is the ground of consciousness, then the line separating human from divine starts to blur. And history shows us this was the most dangerous idea of all. Mystics across traditions have whispered the same forbidden truth. The awareness reading these words right now is the same awareness that the Bible calls I Am. You don't possess a piece of divinity, you are an expression of it. But organized religion couldn't allow this truth to spread. Why? Because if you realize the divine is within you, you don't need priests, rituals, or institutions to mediate your access to God. Authority collapses, control dissolves. So instead, institutions built elaborate systems of separation. God up there, you down here, salvation only through them. Yet traces of the forgotten truth remain. Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." The psalmist writes, "You are God's, all of you are children of the Most High." The Gnostic Christians, the Sufi poets, the Jewish Kabbalists, all pointed to the same shocking recognition. What you seek has never been separate from you. But here's the twist. If this is true, then the entire narrative of salvation shifts. It's not about earning forgiveness from an external deity. It's about remembering what you already are. And that raises the final, most radical question. If you are already divine consciousness, then what exactly is death? Death, illusion, and the eternal present. Every religion has promised a way to soften the terror of death: heaven, reincarnation, paradise, transcendence. For millennia, these stories gave people hope, but they also kept them bound to systems of belief. But what if death itself has been misunderstood? Modern physics says energy cannot be created or destroyed, it only changes form. Mystics add something deeper: consciousness. The ground of being itself was never born and can never die. The you that is aware of your thoughts right now is the same eternal awareness that flickered through every saint, every skeptic, every ordinary person who ever lived. Bodies dissolve, personalities fade, memories scatter. But the screen of awareness on which they appeared remains untouched, like the canvas that outlives every painting. Death, then, is not an end, but a shift in perspective. This reframes resurrection too, not as a one-time miracle, but as the eternal truth of consciousness itself, life expressing, dissolving, and renewing endlessly. The crucifixion story becomes less about one man defeating death and more about the universal reality that what you truly are cannot be destroyed. Here's the revelation. The final fear evaporates when you realize you were never separate from the eternal I Am. Death isn't the enemy. Forgetting who you are is. And remembering? That is liberation. So where did God come from? After this journey, the answer may surprise you. The question dissolves. God doesn't come from anywhere, because God isn't a being inside the universe. God is existence itself, the awareness in which every star, every thought, every life rises and falls. The forbidden history isn't about dusty scriptures or hidden archives. It's about the truth staring you in the face every moment. The divine isn't far away. It isn't locked behind rituals or reserved for the chosen few. It's here, in the awareness that is reading these words, in the breath you're taking right now. And maybe that's why the question has always felt dangerous. Because once you realize that what you seek is what you already are, the entire structure of fear, obedience, and control begins to collapse. That's the real forbidden knowledge. You are not separate. You never were. If this exploration challenged how you think about God, time, or even yourself, don't let the journey stop here. Subscribe and join me as we keep pulling back the veil on the stories that have shaped human history and discover the truths hiding beneath them. Because the deepest secrets are never out there, they're already within.